This is Well Read Reviews. Today we're going to be discussing Absolute Batman 1 from DC Comics. We're joined by Twitless and Matt C. Stay right there. Let's get into it. Twitless, set us off. What's the book that we're discussing?
We're going to be talking about Absolute Batman, which is part of DC's new initiative called All In. This is something that mainstream comics do once in a while to create a new jumping on point. I'm a little unclear as to kind of what angle they were going for, even when I heard Joshua Williamson talking about it. But it was, this new time to jump into comics and all in, and it was I don't know. There was a certain energy to it. Williamson is about bringing energy to books, so the basic way to pitch this, from my understanding, is it's kind of like what Marvel did years ago when they had the Ultimate Comics line. Everyone remember that? Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men.
Yeah.
And anyone who's a fan of the MCU is very familiar because the Ultimate line is really what generated most of a lot of what we got from those films. They just pulled straight from Ultimate Marvel. In this case, we're getting Absolute as opposed to Ultimate DC, and so we're getting a very Scott Snydery, edgy take to several mainstream characters like Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. So an alternate universe, and also means alternate origins and alternate takes on these beloved
Ooh,
characters.
alternate.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I found it. It was a pretty exciting. This is a great place for me to jump in because I'm a big fan of comics and not particularly. I don't have a history per se in DC and in Marvel, so this was really fun to kind of come in on a soft reboot, kind of alternative take story to Batman, and see how they wanted to introduce him and the characters around him. And I think Scott Snyder, the writer of Absolute Batman #1, I I think he hooked me. I think he did a good job, I think, of explaining the story world and getting me involved. I think we saw Alfred as like a spec ops sniper guy or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what was going on with
don't know how
that.
I feel about
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And
Everyone seemed a little beefier, a little like, I don't know. It almost feels like a return to like early '90s kind of comics in a way.
I've got
I don't
a
know if that was intentional.
I've got a guilty confession. I cut my teeth on Batman comics, and
Oh,
I've been
nice.
reading Batman for years and years and years. I don't know exactly how palatable this was for me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
were a lot of puzzle pieces that are quite familiar and typically fit together nicely, but they were just scattered across the table here and
Mm,
rearranged randomly. So I really wasn't vibing on some of it. Some of it didn't gel and feel quite like Batman. Some of it worked. I think the new design actually I am favorable to. I like the idea of this is like a McFarlane toy. He's medieval, brutish, gothic
yeah,
Batman, and
definitely.
yeah, he tears off the chest symbol, and it's an axe. And there's a scene where like all these big spikes come out of his back. So I was digging all of that. Like I actually like the aesthetic, but some of the backstory, some of what they reimagined with some of these characters, I don't know if it's quite Ultimates. I wouldn't really call it an Ultimates line for the DC universe because Ultimates was meant to go back to the origin, a return to form in a lot of ways for those series, but with a modern take on them. And this is certainly not a return to form of the origins of Batman. This
Mhm.
is something completely new, completely unique, and completely its own, I think.
that I think there's a valid point to that. I would bring up though, and this is something that reminded me of Ultimate. Ultimate was one of the one of my first experiences with certain superheroes, and so I'm it got me into paying attention to certain characters. And one thing the Ultimate Comics did is they kind of revisited the lore that had been kind of accumulated like a snowball for generations, decades, half a century or more in some cases, and they kind of would find connections and they would connect everything. And so, for example, like in Ultimate Fantastic Four, characters who originally were just kind of, they discovered each other over time, like, Richards and Doctor Doom initially, suddenly were much more closely connected. And they would do that with a lot of the other Marvel characters as well. Eventually, you ended up with weird scenarios where the X-Men and Nick Fury are all kind of connected. And so Absolute Batman is kind of attempting to do the same thing here, where a lot of Batman's lore characters, or several of them, who normal originally had just kind of popped up over time, are suddenly all directly connected. Like Bruce is like, there's like a photo that we see, and it's like Bruce, and he's connected to several of his rogue, who will eventually probably be his rogues gallery. I think Killer Croc is like the local gym owner,
Yeah.
and so there's
Batman's a gym bro.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that attempt. Now I will say that I had a generous read of this, and I'll say it connects back to that ultimate concept, and if these creators are going to do very experimental, weird takes and twist things around, even at random at times, I would prefer that they do it in these types of controlled lab conditions, like an alternate or
Mhm.
else worlds scenario. I think the problem that a lot of us have is when we read a book and we go, "Hey, I've been reading Spider-Man." There are people who've read Spider-Man almost their entire lives. People who've kept up with characters like the X-Men or Superman, and then someone throws a monkey wrench in and says, "Actually, everything you thought about this character is a lie." And people, that doesn't sit well with people. So if you're going to do these very radical reimaginings of characters, it needs to be in these conditions, and it allows you to kind of separate and say, hey, regular Batman, his canon is a certain way, but hey, what do you got for me in this very alternate take? And that's also what I think allows them to do it in film, for example, like the very different takes, like the Batman or Joker or the rest. So this is them kind of doing it in comics.
And they even kind of refer to mainstream comics are really good about talking about the mythology of these characters, right? And what can you do with a mythology, right? But like you could actually honor that mythology by revisiting it and kind of getting at it from slightly different angles, right?
Yeah,
Maybe streamlining certain points.
the part that didn't work well for me, and I don't think I've ever seen as much mythology about the Batman ever introduced in a single issue. They took so many just pieces and they tried to like mash them all together in this
Mm,
gumbo of like, oh,
yeah,
now he grew up in Crime Alley, and now he's buddies with all of these former villains, and now Joker's a millionaire, and now everything is just like had to
yeah.
take little
He's a
tidbits.
construction worker now, and yeah.
Yeah, it was just so weird to have so many references be established here and reimagined very abruptly in a very condensed way, very suddenly. We probably want to get a little bit into the art style as well. I've heard commentary about people saying it's more manga facing, manga oriented, and that's definitely a very burgeoning market. People would want to appeal to those kinds of customers and bring them into mainstream comics as well. I don't know that this leaned hard enough necessarily. It had a quirkiness and a silliness about it that I guess you do tend to find in manga, but it still had enough of the comics aesthetic that I don't think it's really going to pull in as much of that customer base as they might hope for with this new approach. So
Mhm.
overall, it's a mixed experience. As a standalone thing, it's an interesting choice to use their reimagined version of the Black Mask as their first introductory villain. But what they
Mm.
have him doing, running around with all his little Black Mask minions, the thugs, just wreaking havoc randomly. What do they call them? The party gang. The party gang is
Yeah.
terrorizing Gotham. I mean, is this the circus freaks from Batman Returns? Come on, Can we get better from you, Scott Snyder?
Yeah, they kind of felt like jobbers. I was waiting for the real villain to show up.
Sure.
They're the party animals.
Oh,
There you
yeah.
go.
Yeah. At least they're not the party boys. You know, white parties going on. So we don't need any of that in the Batman universe. But yeah, I was
Yeah.
really I wasn't blown away. I feel like actually I don't want to have a firm take on whether or not I like this universe. I need a couple of issues. I'm going to give it at
Mhm.
least 3 before I make a determination of whether or not this is working.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far and a 4th book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
I think Nick Dragata did a because I think that's the artist, right? So Dragata did I think a solid job on the art. It's definitely a very different artistic take on the character, and it's turned a lot of people off. And I get, again, if this book isn't for you, I think it's okay. It's okay if you look at that symbol on Batman's chest and go, that doesn't look like a bat, and then it turns into an axe. Like, what the heck's going on here? And I think, again, that's also why I'm very glad that they chose the route they're taking with this, because this is, again, it's different universe, and it's a universe where they tell you up front. There's not a rug pull. They tell you pretty much up front, everything is going to be really different, and we're going to be very wildly experimental here. And so
we can still respect the canon that way.
Yeah, and if you're on board with that, I think within the first issue or 2, you're going to be okay with it. And if you're not, you're going to know very quickly. And I think that's a decent way of approaching it, as opposed to teasing, like people like Tom King, right, who got a lot of flack for kind of teasing that he was going to do something with Catwoman and Batman, and then just rug pulled. And a lot of people were really, really left a sour taste in their mouths to his writing for pretty much forever after that. So at least out of the gates, Snyder's like, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's going to be big, bombastic, and silly to an extent. And are you on board? Yes, no. So
but at least it's a take. It's a confident, solid take, I think, which I think is interesting. I don't know. I kind of got like McFarlane vibes as much as I did anime, depending on what the scene was, particularly the action scenes. I don't know. This is the biggest. This is like the beefiest Batman I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, definitely the design, the aesthetic overall is an old McFarlane toy. So I do agree that there's some injection of that. There was a scene where he had like very tiny facial features and a pinkish nose, and I just thought,
I know the panel. Yeah,
that just screams anime.
That's weird. Yeah, that was almost discordant. Yeah, with the other stuff, it almost felt like we're kind of collaging influences.
Can I express a half pet peeve, and that will probably, here's my hot take. I'm a little tired of, and I'm a little irritated with what we're doing with Alfred. We'll talk about the elephant in the room for me, which is Alfred. And there's this trend in multiple forms of media, by the way, to take Alfred further and further into action hero territory. Now, I know that Alfred was like an MI6 kind of a guy, worked for the circus and such, but being an OS officer, being an intelligence asset, there's more than one way to do that. There's being, clever, smart with codes, even being a little bit of a spy. And then there's being John Wick, right? These are different archetypes. And yet when you look at some of the media we're getting, whether it's in film or whether it's in television and now in the comics, they just really seem to be committed to this idea that, in several shots, we've just got Alfred in tactical gear, fully armored up. He looks like freaking Cable almost from the
Mhm.
90s. And it's like,
Yeah.
what happened to Jarvis? What happened to Alfred? Why
Yeah,
is
Jeeves.
the,
Yeah.
the the butler who's very resourceful, the resourceful butler archetype who's still kind of deadly? Don't underestimate him, because he could slip a sword cane out somewhere and stab you in the back if you don't keep an eye on him. Like, that's a good archetype. The mentor who's a little bit more dangerous than you assume he is, and the butler aesthetic is a really great. Elegant and refined aesthetic for comics. And why do we have to make everybody into Cable?
Do you think, or when they play against that expectation, are they kind of watering down a more unique feature of the Batman story universe? You know, by giving you, like, it is kind of it piques your interest when they play against that expectation, but they're playing against it by giving you something that looks a lot more like most other, like you said, there's half a dozen superheroes you could think of off the top of your head that he now looks like. So
Right.
now he's less distinguishable. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think? What do you think about that? Well read.
Well, yeah, by trying to be more unique and more outside of the norm, they actually made it more generic,
Yeah.
which is pretty disappointing. Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
very unique characteristic for Batman to have a butler. You wouldn't expect that from a dark vigilante. And that's actually his pseudo father figure. I think the way that they rewrote that lore was a little bit strange here as well,
Yeah.
with the dad just taking him out to the zoo and having a mass murder occur, where that's where he loses his life and risks his life to save his son, who ends up
Yeah, like
in
a
the
shooter incident at a
yeah,
zoo,
yeah,
I guess?
exactly.
Mhm.
Random also. Maybe he's trying to do a little social commentary there. I'm not sure, but having Batman survive the experience in the Bat exhibit, and that's what motivates him to take on this persona, is a little bit unexpected, I guess. I'm I'm wedded a little bit to the idea of him just falling into a big bat cave and terrified by those creatures and that experience into taking on the idea of being a Batman. Or we'll go back to, the 1930s where the bat just flew in through the window and he's like, "Hey."
Right. Yeah. Hey,
But
there's
you
Batman.
you know, the
Hey,
the neat
you.
thing about Snyder writing this is that he's gonna pull his bag of tricks from film
Mhm.
into origin stories, and, uh, like, typically, like, one of the really neat, tricks that you can do in film or in TV is you can have these little hooks. It's like little, like, Chekhov's guns kind of moments, like, where you can rhyme a couple times in dialogue, and then that, like, sufficiently supplies you with the justification to do what you're doing. And I think Snyder did it here where he had Batman earlier in the issue say, "Whatever you do, don't come out of the door, don't look out, don't peek around the door," kinda thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then later on, that was exactly what his father said in that origin story
Right.
moment. And like, film directors love doing that kind of thing to kind of, give you, to signal a memory from 20 pages before, or, several scenes before, and oftentimes that's all the justification they need. So if there's less, dramatic visually of a scenario, that's okay, so long as they can signal something in the dialogue, which is kind of, I mean, if I had something critical to say about this, it would be that there are moments in this that I feel like it's well written, but it's clearly written by someone who has more experience in film and television. It's not written for comics when you do that sort of thing. Oftentimes, you actually, like, leading into a visually arresting origin story is much more important in comics than just,
Right.
rhyming a dialogue pattern to tie things up at an important emotional moment. You can do both, but you absolutely have to have it be visually arresting, and we didn't get that with the zoo scenario, so
I agree.
That is interesting. Scott is primarily a comics writer, though, so he may be channeling from film
Hmm.
register in some ways, but he is, that's mostly where he's parked his career. Um,
It felt like a TV moment, you know?
Yeah, but you
yeah.
you are right, though. I agree
Uh,
with you.
To kind of tie it home into the book, and the whole deal with Alfred is very important. It's not just me being picky, because it basically is the plot for the first issue. The first issue is essentially a little bit of a recap of the origin story through the guise of the fact that Alfred has been sent as a secret agent by his handlers to go and investigate what's going on in Gotham and to potentially essentially kill the Batman if he gets in the way. And so that puts him into. So not only do we have Alfred being a different type of character, his relationship with Batman, at least what it seems on the surface here from this first issue, is one of enmity. Like I'm going to be your enemy. I'm here to assassinate you potentially. And Alfred's clearly like, he's a little playful with it. He's like, I want to see what this guy can do. So he's not just like being a bloodthirsty murderer about it, but the setup here for even their relationship is very different. That's basically covers what happens in this first issue. Alfred investigating the Batman and finding out how awesome and buff and almost Hulk like he is.
No, critical detail though. Why does he know that he's not a bad guy? Like, why does he know that he isn't just another rogue vigilante making the city worse?
I think he's
He
still
signals this
discovering
time and
it.
again. It's because he's not killing people. So that was kind of a return to form in a way, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't kill Alfred. So
It almost felt weird though, like he's chopping off people's hands with his new axe symbol, and then he's giving them, haphazard instructions on going to the emergency room to get it reattached. And so I just
yeah, it ends with him literally taking Alfred's gun and shooting him in the head with it, only for Alfred to get up and say, "Oh, he modified my gun so that it doesn't kill you anymore."
Yeah. It's like blood and gore. Psych, gotcha.
Yeah.
Really.
He shot little batarangs into his face or something somehow, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Snyder's definitely a competent writer, and there's a lot of thought put into this world. I don't quite know how it's going to play into the rest of the DC universe, if it's going to just continue as a standalone. I'm not sure how long term the investment is going to be for readers. If this is going to be the setting, the continuation of the product that we're going to be getting here, I would like to see these things breathe a little bit more and have some time to flesh out on their own, not just to be condensed and very immediately presented in the way that it was in this issue, and to be established as their own thing. That's what I don't think was happening very much in this issue. And I agree with your point, Matsy. The visual aesthetic piece was missing in a lot of the attributes that make Batman's backstory so unique and so captivating. And it just wasn't here in a lot of ways. So I'm hoping it course corrects. I'm hoping we get better and better as we go along and we discover more about this universe. But for this first issue, I'm not immediately sold. So hoping for more and hoping for more good things.
I liked it. But like I said, I had to put my expectations in a box regarding Batman and be like, okay, this is Batman, but a completely separate deal. And I'm gonna have to just take it on its own terms. And because it's packaged in the absolute box, I am tentatively okay with it so far. We'll see how it pays off in in ensuing issues. But I was all right with it.
Being very ignorant of the story world behind Batman, I found it tightly written, and I found the art reasonably engaging. I felt like it was quality, and I did, because a lot of the signals to the lore went straight over my head. I just felt like I was given a broadly basic reintroduction to Batman that seemed reasonably positive of an experience. I thought it was kind of fun, but I missed a lot of the things that I think were going on in this that I think most DC readers would be picking up on and be justifiably maybe frustrated with it.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.